Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Terri Cole Show. If you happen to be new to this crew, my name is Terri Cole, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the founder of Boundary Bootcamp and Real Love Revolution courses. Why, welcome. I have this, you might be seeing this on YouTube, you might be listening to this as a podcast. Wherever you are, and if you're just joining my crew, I want to say welcome and thank you for being here. And if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel or to my podcast, if you do enjoy it, please do, so I know. And hey, if you like it, leave a positive review, would ya? Hey, it never hurts. All right, moving into today's episode. Actually, before I do, one more thing to say, that if you want to hang out in person with me, ladies, it's only for women, but I'm doing a weekend at Kripalu, which is actually not that far from my upstate house, which is my only house. It is in around Lenox, Massachusetts. So all the information will be in the show notes if you want to join me. It is the weekend of September 13th through the 15th. And wow, all of Team TC is joining me, all the ladies. So we're super amped and we would love for you to join us. It's going to be basically effective communication and boundaries for women. How do we do it? How does it up-level our life? It's going to be great. And Energy Lara, those of you who are familiar with one of my closest friends, Lara Riggio is her name, and she owns the Central Park Energy Center in Manhattan. She will also be joining us and giving us energy medicine strategies to go along with the things that we're learning. So if we got issues in our tissues, we'll be handling that too. Okay. Those are the PSAs for what I'm doing right now. Let's move into this week's episode. Those of you who have been listening or watching, you know, the last couple of weeks we've been doing a lot about dysfunctional family systems, narcissistic family systems, addiction. And I had more than a few people write in and say, okay, we got it, and thank you, because that was helpful. What is a healthy family system? So what are the things that you can teach us about what that looks like? Because a lot of people who wrote in said, I identified with the dysfunctional family system, but I get that that's not the way to do it, but what is the way that people do it? So this week's episode is all about the 6 traits or strategies or behaviors of healthy family systems. Like, what is it that creates a healthy family system? So let's just start from the top, because this is where everything comes down from. I talked about this briefly in another one of the videos, but I'll talk about it a little bit more in depth here, which is there is a generational hierarchy, meaning the parents are at the top of that hierarchy, and then the children are below that. So with a lot of dysfunctional families, what we find is that the kids were parentified at a young age, meaning you were doing adult things even though you were not an adult. And in healthy family systems, the adults are grown up. So in a healthy family system, what does that mean? That means parents lead. We create a child-centered, which is different than child-obsessed, right? So we're not talking about helicopter parenting or being super insanely obsessed with your children, because that isn't healthy either, and it isn't good for the kids. This is more about a child-centered experience where the kids' needs must come and do come in a healthy family system above the adults' needs and or the adults' dysfunction. Makes sense? So we see the hierarchy. That means always being the adult, which can be very difficult, especially when kids get into their teenage years and start acting like idiots. It's hard not to be like, are you kidding? Like, you want to fight with them, but the reality is you have to continue to draw those healthy boundaries. And if you're getting triggered, you should not be having that interaction with the kid, because a 15-year-old is still a minor. They're still a child. They're in this crazy developmental phase of their own life, as kids are in every phase of their development. Like, they don't know what's going on. They're just doing, right? They're just doing. And when you look at a 9-year-old and are like, I have no idea why you're being that way, you need to look at the parents. You need to look at who is setting the tone for the way that kids are behaving. And I'm going to give you a bunch of other ways that we can do that, but it's very important to really get, kids don't just fall off a tree generally being a particular way. So yes, there is nature and there is nurture. So I'm not saying that there are not examples of kids who are born a particular way. You could be in a perfectly healthy family and the kid could end up not being perfectly healthy. Yes, that happens. But the truth is, most of the time, it is the soil that the seed is grown in that dictates how healthy that plant is. All right, longest, weirdest analogy, but you get what I'm saying, right? I think you do. Right, okay, so hold on. There we go. Moving on from the generational hierarchy. We got it. Emotional, physical well-being of the children are what the parents' focus is. And that also means that the parent has a clue as to how kids develop. Learn about parenting. Learn about phases of development for children, because how would we know it unless we read about it or we're interested? Get parenting magazines. There's tons of support. I'm not saying you need to get your PhD in early childhood education or whatever, but it is valuable to become learned about these things, because there's so much information out there. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your own couch. Just go on Google and go to a reputable site. Go to Psychology Today, and there are many, many ways that you can learn, especially if you're struggling with something. And of course, there's going to be different views, but no view is going to say that a healthy family is focused on an addict, right? That is not a healthy family. That is an unhealthy family, which we've already covered. All right, moving into the second thing is about kindness and compassion. So within a healthy family system, this is basically the way that you function as much as possible. It's not the exception, it's the rule. That kindness and compassion are really, really important for children to be seen, to not be judged, to not develop shame, toxic shame, long-lasting shame. A lot of it has to do with being in systems where there's tons of criticism and tons of judgment. So your job as a parent is to teach kids, right? Whether someone did it for you or not. If you want to know, because a lot of you emailed me, this is my 2 cents on it. Kindness. Even when a kid is acting out, your job is to look at the macro view, like, oh, they're 2.5 and they're exhausted. So yes, no, it's not cool that they just punched me in the leg, but I'm not punching them back because I'm a grown-up, right? I'm not, but they are going for a nap, or they are having time out, and their sleep schedule is also your deal, right? That's being a good parent, is you know that kids need a lot of sleep. And whether they like it or not, they need to sleep, and you need to set up an organization that allows them to sleep a lot, right? I had friends who would say, well, they wouldn't do it. I don't know. My mother just would be like, time for a nap. Even if you're not sleeping, you're going to be in there for an hour. You can read, you can rest. But this was how she raised 4 kids basically by herself. 4, little kids, because we were within like 6.5 years of each other. It never entered my mind to be like, no, I'm not. She'd be like, yeah, you are. Close the door. Like, there was something about those rules and that structure that actually makes a child feel secure. Whether my mother felt like she knew what she was doing, I thought she did, because she was telling me what to do and I was doing it, rather than her being like, why are you acting out and exhausted, if she hadn't been focusing on us sleeping enough, or whatever it is. Having very scheduled bedtimes and those types of things is another thing. And I'm not saying you have to be super, super strict about it, especially if the summer comes and, there was always more latitude, at least in the home that I grew up in, over the summer, because you didn't have school, you weren't getting up super early. But there was always a schedule, because schedules also make kids feel very secure, right? They make you feel like you understand. Instead of chaos, you go, oh, I know what's next. It's getting to be bedtime. What's next is I go upstairs and wash and brush. That's what we do. Then my mother would come up and listen to prayers or talk or whatever it is you could do in your family. Talk about what was your favorite thing that happened today, or whatever, if you're not religious or you didn't say prayers. But knowing what's coming next makes a kid feel masterful at any age. And so that is really important. The third thing is clear boundaries. Although I did veer off with kindness and compassion, I veered off into schedules, but clear boundaries would also encompass a schedule that a kid can understand, so they know what's coming. Clear boundaries. And when you think about this, is such an important part of establishing basically the culture of a family. Like, what behaviors are okay and what are not? How do we talk to each other? What language do we use? Teaching children to draw boundaries, to speak about how they feel. This is something that gives them the ability to do it in their life with other people. So you have to model it because they need to know what it looks like. And being clear. Well, Timmy, I did not like that choice that you made to eat your sister's ice cream or whatever we're talking about. So therefore, when you do something, when you take something from your sister, just as if she took it from you, this is now what happens. Now, this is your punishment. Whatever, a punishment that makes sense for the crime. You don't have ice cream tomorrow night. To me, that would be like a normal punishment. But there's got to be some consequences. And that's the same thing with boundaries. If you effectively draw boundaries, there has to be some consequence at some point if those boundaries are stepped over. And it's also very healthy to allow kids to draw boundaries between each other, to have that conversation, to teach them to use words, to say no if they don't want to do something. Kids will always probably still continue to sort of fight and bicker because this, even in a healthy family system, this is part of what kids do. But at least understanding is them understanding what boundaries are and that they have a right to have emotional and physical, sexual boundaries. They're allowed to think differently than other people in this family system, and they won't be punished or excommunicated. Because there's a lot of family systems where that is not allowed, and it makes people end up with the disease to please, and this becomes a very hard thing to get out of in adult life. So another thing with the clear boundaries and having kids know what it is that's coming next, so some kind of a schedule, is having some kind of family rules, right? Rules and chores. What do people do? Everyone, for there to be a cohesive system and for it to have its own homeostasis that's healthy, right? To keep it going. Everyone needs to chip in and feel like they're adding value in some way. So even if you can afford to have someone do everything, or even if you have a propensity to do everything, I promise you, doing everything for children is really, truly doing them a disservice. And I know most of you probably know this, but you're doing that for yourself, or you're doing that out of insecurity, but it's not because it's what's best for them. Even little kids can empty a wastebasket or set a table. And when they learn those types of things, it makes them feel good about themselves. Like, I know how to do this. That feels good. And of course, we're only talking about age-appropriate things. And I've also heard horror stories about people who, at a young age, they and their siblings were cleaning the entire house basically with a toothbrush. I'm not talking about extremes. I'm talking about how do we teach children that they matter, is to allow them to be a part of the solution. And this also creates cohesion. So family rules, curfews, chores, all of those things, and being clear about it. You can have a family rules thing hanging up in the kitchen so everyone can see it, That is an important part of kids feeling like they're in a cohesive unit. The fourth thing is effective and safe communication. Again, there has to be boundaries around. How do we communicate? Communicate with words. Even when you're mad, it can be really hard to communicate with words when you're pissed. But that's where you have to be the grown-up. And you have to always be looking at the macro view of parenting. And if you have a whole bunch of unresolved childhood shit in this area, it's very difficult to do because kids, when they get to the age that you had these injuries happen to you, let's say in life, your injuries get reactivated if they have not been deactivated through therapy, writing, journaling, a burning thing, whatever. There's many, many ways that we can deactivate these things, but we need to know. That's like I'd like to talk about the bag of crap in your basement, right? So if that bag of crap is there, when you get to those different ages where those things happened, that will get reactivated. And it is so painful the second time, almost even more painful, because you can't believe the things that your parents did that you feel like, oh my God, I would never do that or whatever. I remember raising teenagers, and by the time I was a teenager in my own family system, I felt like, my parents were divorced. My mother was exhausted. She was just like, wow, I'm so over this. And I was a good kid, so I didn't have a lot of trouble. But I remember when I took on the role of parenting teenagers, because I married a widower and I literally married 3 teenage boys, that things that were happening, I remember being like, this is no way. There were no rules, right? And I remember thinking, these kids are out till all hours on a school night, on like a Tuesday night. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, no way. And then I had to go back to the fact that I was out at all hours, being a sophomore in high school, hanging out with all seniors, drinking until 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Like, the worst things in the world could have happened to me. I was lucky, right? Those things didn't necessarily happen. And I don't know, though. My point is, I don't know if I would have thought about that again in the same way had I not then been in the role of a parent to teenagers. I don't know that I would have, but it made it so painful that I couldn't believe that my mother was home sleeping while I was out hanging out with seniors. Like, what the actual F are you doing? Hello, anything could happen to me. So be prepared that happens. If you don't resolve the bag of crap in the basement, the bag of crap definitely resurfaces at every age that you experienced dramatic or traumatic things that you have not handled. So handling your stuff is, I should have said, all right, now I'm getting more than 6, but I should have said that at the top, that's probably the most important thing that you can do. All right, moving into be equitable. Do not have favorite children. Look at your family system. Understand what happened in your life. If you came from a family where it wasn't fair, where you had golden children and scapegoats and all that, do not do that. Be fair. The rules need to apply to all the kids the same. And I don't mean the same like if they're at different ages. I mean the same. When everyone is 13, they get to do this. Let's say in my house, you were allowed to get your ears pierced when you were 13. Okay. Well, it shouldn't suddenly change. Even if it's the last kid, try to keep it equitable to the best of your ability, because kids really feel that, and it's painful. It's painful to that kids don't feel like they're not the favored one, and you will always have kids where you're more identified or you resonate more with the way that they are, but that doesn't mean that you should act that way or change any rules. You really have to work to treat them very similarly. Even the ones that act out, you have a different punishment in direct relationship to what they've done. But besides that, you really have to work to teach them this, to treat them the same. All right, moving on to last one is, I called it team spirit, which is basically teaching kids that being in a family system is it's an honor, right? Like holding everyone in high esteem, but not pitting children against each other in the way they are, the way they look, what they do. My mother used to always say, because I had 3 older sisters, to me and to all my sisters, like, you have 3 built-in best friends. So don't ever tell me that you're bored, because your best friends are right here. And whether I felt that way at the time or not, I don't know, but it planted the seed about siblings being friends, that it was possible, but also that they could be your best friends. And to a degree in our lives, this has been what's played out. It also creates loyalty, right? There's a certain amount of loyalty that, like, knowing that if someone is in need within the family system, you do your very best. And I'm not talking about addictive family systems where one person is the designated patient and is always in need. I'm literally talking about real life. Something happened. Someone's getting a divorce. Someone is sick. My oldest sister needed a new liver. I mean, that was a whole thing where we just step up to go whatever. And luckily she got it in time, and that was 5 years ago, and she is very well, thank God. Oh my God, please be an organ donor. If you're not, please do it, because it saves people's lives, because she definitely would have died without it. That was a little PSA for organ donation. But anyway, moving back into the last thing I want to say about this is that creating the cohesive nature of a family system has so much to do with the parents, because you're basically the CEO or the CFO of the family. You're creating the culture, spending time with kids, creating family traditions, creating, family vacations, all of those things, creating memories. It's not just checking a box or doing your due diligence. It's actually enjoying the kids that you've brought into the world and getting to know them and valuing them. So that's my 2 cents. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. I'm also going live the 4th Thursday of July. So it's YouTube, The Terri Cole Show live on YouTube. So the information for that is below as well. So if you do not, are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do it, because then before I go live, you'll get a little thing that says, hey, I'm going live. So you don't miss a thing. I want to say thank you so much for watching, for sharing, for caring about being healthy. I appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing week. And as always, take care of you.